In the autumn skies over Korea, on September 15, 1952, a formation of F-84 Thunderjet fighter-bombers from the United States Air Force roared northward toward the Yalu River, the volatile border separating China and North Korea. Their mission was to strike vital enemy supply lines, feeding Chinese and North Korean troops entrenched in the mountains below. Every sortie across the Yalu carried immense danger, not only from the flak batteries lining the riverbanks, but also from the MiG-15, the fearsome Soviet-built jets that patrolled the skies with deadly precision. Escorting the Thunderjets that morning was a flight of F-86 Sabres from the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing, led by Captain James Robinson Risner. At 28 years old, Risner was already recognized as a skilled pilot, calm, disciplined, and fiercely loyal to the men who flew beside him. His wingman that day was Lieutenant Joe Logan, a close friend and trusted partner. Together, they formed part of the thin line of airmen who stood between the enemy and the vulnerable bomber formations over Korea. As the American aircraft approached the Yalu, radar warnings began to sound. From the misty northern horizon, MiG-15s appeared, small, swept-wing fighters diving from high altitude. What began as routine escort duty instantly turned into an air duel. Risner spotted one MiG peeling down toward the formation and rolled his F-86 into pursuit. The two jets twisted and climbed in a deadly aerial chase that quickly crossed into Chinese airspace, a zone American pilots had been explicitly forbidden to enter. But Risner refused to break off. For more than 100 miles, the two aircraft wove through thin clouds and mountain valleys. Finally, Risner caught the MiG in his sights and opened fire with his 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns. His bullets tore into the enemy jet, which burst into flames and spiraled toward the Yalu River below. It was an extraordinary victory, but it was only the beginning of a far greater story. As the Americans turned back toward friendly territory, Risner noticed that his wingman, Lieutenant Joe Logan, was in serious trouble. Anti-aircraft fire from the ground had struck Logan's F-86, rupturing the fuel system and disabling the engine. Thick black smoke poured from the tail as the aircraft began to lose altitude rapidly. They were deep behind enemy lines, far from any hope of rescue. Risner could hear Logan's strained voice over the radio. His friend was alive, but barely in control. Risner refused to abandon him. In one of the most daring acts in aviation history, he made a decision that defied logic. He would try to push Logan's crippled jet to safety. Carefully maneuvering his own F-86 beneath Logan's tailpipe, the two aircraft, now dangerously close, hurtled through the sky, locked together at nearly 200 miles per hour. Turbulence buffeted them both, and the slightest misalignment could have caused a fatal collision. Risner later described the moment as trying to balance a baseball bat on the tip of your finger while flying at 200 knots. Each second required absolute precision. The airflow from Logan's damaged jet made control nearly impossible, and fuel continued to leak from the ruptured fuselage, coating Risner's canopy with oil. But somehow, the two aircraft stayed together as Risner pushed Logan toward the sea, mile after mile, across 60 miles of hostile territory. By the time they reached the coast, Logan's engine had completely died. His cockpit was filling with smoke, and the last drops of fuel were gone. Risner knew there was nothing more he could do. Over the radio, he urged his friend to eject. Logan bailed out over the ocean near Chodo Island, but the sea was rough and cold. Despite desperate rescue efforts, Lieutenant Joe Logan drowned before he could be recovered. Risner circled helplessly overhead, watching the waves close around his friend. It was a devastating loss, yet what Risner had attempted was so extraordinary that it became legend. Military commanders and fellow pilots could hardly believe the feat. Two jet aircraft, locked together in flight, one pushing the other in a last-ditch effort to save a man's life. The U.S. Air Force later described it as one of the most magnificent feats of airmanship ever witnessed. Captain Robinson Risner continued to serve with distinction. He went on to score 8 confirmed aerial victories in Korea, becoming one of America's first jet aces. His reputation as both a warrior and a man of compassion grew, but his trials were far from over. More than a decade later, during the Vietnam War, Risner was shot down and captured. He spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, where he became a symbol of endurance and leadership for fellow captives, surviving years of torture and solitary confinement. When he finally returned home, Robinson Risner was celebrated not just as a fighter ace, but as a man whose courage went beyond combat. He embodied the bond between pilots, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than orders, and, in his case, nearly stronger than the limits of flight itself. The story of Captain James Robinson Risner and his fallen wingman, Lieutenant Joe Logan, remains one of the most remarkable human stories to emerge from the skies over Korea. A story not of victory, but of sacrifice, loyalty, and the impossible lengths one man would go for a friend.